I just grabbed a whole bunch of change and it was liquid and it had some sugar on it, and that sugar had been soaked inside of a package with some hand sanitizer that spilled on it. So how much chemical composition was in the coagulation of the pile between the coins, because there's a lot of different ones and people probably touched them in different places, versus grabbing all of it at once and sliding it off the table and putting it in my pants. Quite a lot of different triangulations of the construct because it was all one, because the liquid was binding to the solid metals, the solid metals, the coins, and it had some grain in it with the liquid, and then the material coin had some granular sugar in it, had the liquid water. It had 3 different constructs, but probably multiple others. And by probably multiple others, I mean people's different coins came from each different person, most likely. How many people had touched that before this very day? Probably over 1,000 collectively. But I would like to know, and if I did, that would be a triangulation of fingerprints. That's what the FBI takes. Owning the land, you can get smarter by knowing crystals. And no, that is not a slang word for something that is illegal. The crystalline structure is in math, and you can find that on anything with triangulation. Over here we've got some spider webs and you can barely see it, but if it's flickering back and forth it might look like smoke, because that's a burning station where things that are on fire get put out. So if all your neurons were combined to make one thing that was really dense and small, would it be as strong as a chicken wishbone or an antler baby antler? And it's kind of like a big feather. Its stem or its quill is the same as like a twig or a really small baby antler horn or a chicken bone wishbone. And when there's antlers in a car, it's kind of like how a dream catcher is made, because it has sticks around it, and sticks and antlers are the same density, because they are also in different shapes that are because they're also very similar in shapes that are in the same size. Yeah, that's fucking right, dude. Maybe if you're gonna run and start and then do 180. That's all I'm willing to do. Where this side holds my phone. See, and when I start speaking of things that are like super innovative, and then like either the entity hears me, I like to speak with more people or part of the body, but they're harder to find. When the entity hears me speaking on things that are kind of, like ahead of their time, it's scrutinized as for their leverage, because they can understand how me seeming unintuitive is beneficial every time they choose it to be. So literally I would just be trying to get this sign to hold my phone, and they would take that as a reason to call the body. This guy looks like he needs to be checked on, and this is happening 3% of the time that I go outside. The state workers, social workers for the government, whenever people who are really into the corporate world, they have their corporate parks, you have corporate parades, fairs, you name it. When they start speaking of sovereign nation and the word civil, what have you, to me it's a play where they think they're playmaking just by shooting the breeze they look for leverage because their entity is always in their mind. Me, on the other hand, of receiving the entity's prescribed notion from them is deemed at any point of time confrontational and insubordinate instead of civil and or sovereign, in their opinion, and that it would work every time in their favor because of the body having it easier for them to be what they claim I am not. An entity. And I could have told you that, but it takes the body in order for them to talk, or else they would just say it to my face. When I do hear them speaking of it being the words that define land, it is always with the understanding that I'm non-essential, because that's how they view the body at any point of time. And this is just a stark relation of what I'm dealing with currently. And it can't be any more cut and dry. I just got a letter from some a-hole who missed a hearing and now wants another. So he gets an appeal and a petition. It's the same effing thing. He petitions for an appeal as if those things were different. I, to get the hearing, did not have the opportunity to get heard initially. The adjudifier was an a-hole. I used my appeal on the adjudifier. To my dismay, the hearing with the judge was just me and him alone. The determination was made, yes, in favor of this guy. So then this a-hole writes a letter saying, oh, you know what, I wish I could have came. It didn't. Let's have another one. And so then he didn't like the outcome. He, meaning the entire business, a company, a corporation, an entity is what judicially they file themselves as, wants to appeal. And then if it turns in their favor in hearing number 2, then I probably won't have an appeal because I already used it. So them being an entity, they didn't need a judifier to get a hearing. They being an entity, they can bypass a decision without even showing up. Just if they don't like it, they say, I appeal. And I cannot. Just because of my own self, I'm disadvantaged in a entity structured coherence where the entity and the body, they're in cahoots because, well, they have more profit to gain from each other than I do with either of them. Capiche? Capiche. And I can see where this is going. The student loans, what do we call the student system? What kind of a name can we think of? Academia, because they are definitely prevalent in what they're doing and incorporating the body with the entity. You need to have money from the entity in order to pay the body. The body allows the school academia there because they get major state funding and cuts. The body cuts the academia so that they can manifest with giant arenas so people in the local towns can pay money to go watch sporting events so they can buy more offices and buildings and things to teach. But it's all cut from state funding from the body. The body is the judicial system, the state governance. And so then this is two-sided. You're getting the back end. The entity, you make money, and so that you can go and pay them to go into the academia and learn what they're teaching. Later, if you can't pay all the money from right up front, if the entity isn't liking you enough to give you enough money to pay the academia, then the body steps in and says, you know what, I gave them a break, I'm gonna give you a break. And what their break is a loan. And they break you off a piece of that loan to go to school, and now they have directly correlated through the academia a main crossover into the body. And they do this on the internet flawlessly. I was just paying a payment to the academia on the internet, and then it says, oh, can we link the IRS? The IRS is the state governance, federal bureau. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, I know what you guys are doing, and you guys want to be as close together so that if there's any cahoots, such as the school being shut down from a virus, that those payments are not going to be tampered with. And the more backing they have from the body, the academia will be. I had a check-in on myself from a welfare, the well-being of myself, and this was startling because whenever I go outside, there's like a 3% chance that the police are going to follow me, from a person saying follow that guy. And believe it or not, 3 out of 100 times of me being outside, someone has looked at me, pointed their finger, and called the police to follow this guy. He doesn't look right. Something's not right. You need to look into him. And here come the police, ready to have a peek at my well-being. And so where this is going, instead of the internet crossing over where I was making a payment, I was just updating my information, whatever, on my academic website, they directly linked it to the IRS website. I'm now being directly linked by a person's opinion to the body where the policemen are